Good morning everybody and welcome back to Indycar on Wednesday morning. My name's Gordon Ross and today's subject is the meeting today between Nicola Sturgeon, Carwyn Jones and the Prime Minister. Now, the meeting's been called by Theresa May to try and break the deadlock between the devolved parliaments of both Scotland and Wales and the Westminster government. All of this over the 111 powers which will come back from the European Union after Brexit, in which the UK government is reluctant, or seems reluctant, to hand over to the devolved governments, as they should do. Under the various agreements which underpin devolution, these are the Smith Commission, the Sewell Convention and the Scotland Act, all powers which are not reserved, in other words, all which are not on the list of Westminster powers, which are basically invested in Westminster, all the powers which are not in that list should automatically just come to the parliaments of Scotland and Wales. But for some reason, at least 25 of these powers the UK government wants to hang on to, and as they put it, to incorporate into national frameworks for their incorporation into the whole of the United Kingdom. Now, what this means, for those of you who, like myself, who are not really familiar with the kind of language used and the legal language used by governments, is that the UK government sees 25 of these laws as in some way dangerous to the Union, that they're in some way going to give Scots and Welsh parliaments some power which the United Kingdom does not want them to have. Now, I listed some of these powers recently in another broadcast, and they include things like control over the environment, control over dangerous chemicals, agricultural chemicals. It deals with fishing, it deals with farming, it deals with the protection of wild places, protection of species, the security of the water supply, the purity of rivers, the purity of lochs. All of these things which govern the natural environment of both Scotland and Wales. The UK government, for some reason, wants to withhold the powers that would enshrine these various issues into law in both Scotland and Wales. And you have to ask yourself, why would the UK government want to keep those powers when they really should just hand them over? Because they have no bearing on national frameworks, as they put it. These are powers which should just go to the devolved governments. They deal only with the local issues in those two countries. They have nothing at all to do with the United Kingdom, you would think. Except for one thing, and that is the long-range strategy of the Tory party post-Brexit. You remember that the Conservative government way back 1915, what I meant to say was 2015. Back in 2015, the Tories announced that there would be widespread hydraulic fracturing to find shale oil and shale gas in the UK, as usual, following on years later after an American idea. Now, this was extremely unpopular everywhere in the UK, but particularly in Scotland, where I think it was 95% of the population were against fracking. And the Scottish government put in place first a moratorium which temporarily suspended any kind of activity in fracking prior to the companies involved in fracking being able to prove beyond any doubt scientifically that there was no danger to the environment. Since the moratorium was put in place years before, Ineos and Quadrilla, the two biggest companies involved in this particular industry, have so far not bothered their backsides to try and prove anything at all about fracturing, either its safety or even its commercial prospects. Nothing has come from these companies at all. They've just done nothing. They've been waiting for a chance to challenge the moratorium. Now, last year, the Scottish government decided to make the moratorium into a ban, in other words, a permanent ban enforced by the Scottish government using the planning laws in Scotland. As soon as they did that, Ineos started to challenge this, and they're now launching a legal lawsuit to sue the Scottish government for what they would claim would be losses caused to their company by the ban on fracking. Now, all of this is all related to what the Tories want to do with these powers. Because the powers that the Tories are wanting to withhold, the 25 powers that they want to hang on to, would prevent fracking from taking place anywhere where those laws are enforced, including Wales, incidentally. The Tories want to hang on to them. It's nothing to do with the rest of the UK, it's nothing to do with the good of the people, it's to do with lining the pockets of the Conservative Party and its donors, many of whom have shares in fracking companies. Ineos is a British company, incidentally, but it's headquartered in Switzerland. It has a Swiss backer. So there are obviously there's something going on here where they want to shift their profits offshore and not pay taxes on them. Why else would you be headquartered in Switzerland? So there are a lot of things at play here, but the main thing is that Nicola Sturgeon and Carwyn Jones are meeting Theresa May today, and Theresa Jones has said she wants to try and break the deadlock. The only way she can break the deadlock is to guarantee that all those powers go to both Holyrood and the Welsh Assembly in Cardiff, because otherwise there can be no break in the deadlock. Any First Minister who allow themselves to give up powers which would protect the natural environment in their own country against the will of their own people who elected them would be absolutely crazy. And I wouldn't expect that Nicola Sturgeon or Carwyn Jones would give up a single inch of the high ground that they hold on this at all. So the only option for Theresa May to break this deadlock is for her to say, we will give you all of these powers without any strings attached, if you will allow us and give us consent to the Brexit bill as it's currently going through Parliament in Westminster. It needs the consent of the devolved parliaments in order to proceed into law. And of course, Scotland never wanted Brexit to happen in the first place. Wales voted narrowly for it, but the point of it is that Brexit cannot continue in this until this problem is resolved, until these powers are returned. Scotland, there is no way the First Minister can possibly give up any ground to Theresa May. So I'll be very surprised if anything is given up by either the Welsh First Minister or the Scottish First Minister today. I think it's all down to the Tories. They have got to make the first move here. There's no way that the devolved governments are going to budge an inch, and neither should they. Nobody in their right mind would give away the environmental protections which stop fracking. It would be madness. That would open the door for Ineos to sue the Scottish Government, cost the taxpayers billions of pounds, and allow hydraulic fracturing to occur everywhere across Scotland. It would be madness. It would be opening the door to the biggest environmental disaster on mainland Scotland that there's ever been. So don't think it's going to happen. In the general picture of politics at the moment in the UK, well, there's not much moving so far. I mistakenly published an article about Nicola Sturgeon calling for the next referendum sometime between September this year and March next year, but I realised afterwards when I read the date, although it said the 13th of March on the actual article, it was in fact a shared article from the previous year. So I've pulled that article off my page. Apologise to everybody for the mistake. However, it doesn't alter the fact that the mandate for independence is still lying there on the First Minister's desk. It's ready to be used. Tommy Sheridan spoke yesterday at the Solidarity conference on using the mandate. Spoke very well on not the possibility, but on the necessity of using the mandate this year. It has to be used, otherwise it's just going to expire. People go off the boil, nobody will care anymore. So it's vital that this mandate is used at the time when Sturgeon said it would be. Now, Nicola said that it should be sometime between September 2018 and March, or the end of March 2019, when Brexit is due to happen. And it really must be, because remember that it's very unlikely, because the European Union has now said quite categorically that the British government will not get a transition period unless they give some leeway on joining the currency union and continuing to access the single market. Now, to do those two things, they would have to accept the free movement of people, which the British government absolutely will not do. And that means there is a crisis there, there's a roadblock there. And the Europeans are signalling a long time in advance that if the British government refuses to move on that, there will be no transition period, and that means a cliff edge hard Brexit in March next year. And that is why, even though I misread this article about Sturgeon calling the referendum, even though I misread it yesterday and pulled it, the fact still remains that we have to use the mandate, and we have to use it in the autumn or winter of this year. And we have to use it before Brexit actually occurs. We need to have a yes vote in the bag legally before then. It's very important that we do that. Whether we do it with the Section 30 order or not is immaterial. The point is that the Brexit vote was not a binding referendum. It was not legally binding on anybody. The British government chose to abide by it. They set the precedent that meant that any informational or any advisory referendum would be regarded by the British government as binding. If that is the case, a Scottish referendum can happen without any Section 30 order and must be abided by the British government, because it's already done it with Brexit. So you see what I'm saying here? The clock is ticking, but suddenly the clock is going faster now. It's looking more and more like hard Brexit. We will know probably in the next 2 months whether the European Union is going to pull the transition period away. If they pull the transition period away, as they're threatening to do, hard Brexit is the only possible outcome. At that point, we need to call a referendum. So that's where we are with the referendum, and we're at a stage today where Carwyn Jones and Nicola Sturgeon are holding all the cards with regards to the 111 powers, and the 25 of those powers that the Westminster government is refusing to relinquish. So keep your fingers crossed. I would expect Carwyn Jones and Nicola Sturgeon to hold absolutely firm and not give up a single centimetre to Westminster, in which case Theresa May has got to make concessions. Otherwise, nothing will move forwards. We won't give our consent. And if the British government pushes through the Great Repeal Bill, then it will have broken yet again the treaties of union and give us yet again another mandate to have a referendum in the autumn, as if we needed another one. So that's the situation today, folks. I'm saddened today to hear about the death of Professor Stephen Hawking. As a person who's interested in science, and as an engineer, I had a great deal of respect for Stephen Hawking. I also found his sense of humour absolutely brilliant, especially as I was a big fan of the things like The Big Bang Theory and The Simpsons, and used to find it very heartening that there was a human side to Stephen Hawking, that he had this sense of humour, and I think that's really going to be missed from the scientific community, quite apart from the fact that he's the most giant figure in science since Einstein, and he'll be remembered, as Brian Cox said, for probably 1,000 years, or as long as people talk about science. Anyway, I'm off now. I will see you later. As usual, contact me after the show if you have any ideas for other subjects. Bye for now.